Alright, we're back in this Melons series, and I've been thinking about what we can still do in this world, and the more I think, the more I realise how much there is to do. We're kicking off where we left things off, in the desert at the cactus farm. Yes, I know, we're focusing on a cactus farm in a melon video, but it's a necessary evil, and one that is going to pay dividends in the future. The thing about a melon farmer is they're multifaceted, but make no mistake, melons are still the priority. Like with a lot of the days during this melon series, it started thundering early on, so I was robbed of the sun. It's alright, as you know, my world revolves around melons, so there was no way I was sleeping the day away. And for those of you who don't know what I'm doing, because I haven't actually explained what I'm in the process of doing, I'm continuing the work we started in 200 days of melon farming. I'm creating a huge safe platform that is to be free of mobs that the cacti farm will be sat on top of. At one point I did find myself in the precarious position of falling into water and having the only way out to be blocked by a creeper. Personally, I think I handled the situation nicely. Day 202, there's still quite a bit of sand that needs removing. When I say quite a bit, I mean a lot. But with 98 days still left in this video, we have time on our side. When night came around, it was time to start lighting the place up. It's only so that mobs don't spawn in the area. They're an absolutely huge inconvenience. The torches are being placed at each line intersection that I'd worked a lot on in my 200 days video. Basically, I just planned out where the torches were going to be placed, nothing particularly impressive. Day 203, there was a problem to do with the melons. Blasphemy? No, because I should clarify it's not the melons themselves that pose the problem, because there would never be a problem with melons. They are perfection in a fruit. It's the visitors they attract, Endermen. They keep robbing my melons and I have to constantly replace them. I don't blame them. If I came across melons as juicy and as ripe as mine, I'd want to take them too. It's just a fucking pain in the pancreas. Talking of juicy melons, I ran out. As well as rockets, hence why I'm collecting sugarcane. I've got the gunpowder, I just need the paper to make the rockets, and I seem to have run out. What a way to travel. I don't know how this is even possible when I think about the physics, but who cares, it's fun. And it's quick, so I was home by the next morning, though if I created a passageway in the nether suitable for elytra travel, then it would be even quicker. Maybe a project for the future. Right now, elytra overworld travel is fine by me, and my focus is on the cactus farm. Again, when it got dark, the torches came out. It's not often I take 2 consecutive full nights to place torches, but when it does happen, it's really nothing special. It's just me placing torches. Some of it was taken up with mob killing, so I probably shouldn't say 2 full nights of just placing torches. Here's an update so far on the area. As you can see, there is a grid pattern running across the entire space. As I mentioned in 200 days, this was simply so I could get the spacing for the torches correct, and so I can get light into the area early on so I could continue finishing the project in peace without being interrupted during future nights. I hadn't checked on my cactus chest. I wanted to make sure the chest wasn't completely full. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. Again, I spent another day lighting up the area, and I actually got it done. This is officially a mob-free zone, as all areas made out of melons should be. I will not have their contaminated feet touch my melons. I'm going to be honest, I have a feeling I'm going to be spending most of these 100 days in this area. It's clearly not a quick project. So I made a small setup, a home away from home as it were, a bed, an ender chest, etc. The essentials. I also removed the iron arrow pointing home. I've made the journey enough times now to know the way home. Before I begin filling in my giant grid with melons to make it one large area, I've got to get rid of sand within its perimeters, and there are lots of sand dunes that need flattering. Having a good efficiency shovel helps, but there was way too much sand for the amount of shovel I had, meaning I had to stop before it broke. I didn't fly back to the mob spawner immediately to repair it. Instead, while I was in the area, it made sense to use up what melons I had on me, filling in the area that wasn't clogged with sand. Then, when I head back to repair the shovel, I can restock on melons, 2 birds 1 stone, or as I like to say, 2 melons 1 seed. Which doesn't make sense at all. Obviously, being a melon video, I have to show phantoms trying to fuck things up for me. Trying being the key word, because they couldn't. I'm much too strong. I didn't want to see them for a few more days at least, so I slept the final parts of the night away. The next day I still had melons to get rid of at the desert, and this was the progress after placing all of my melons, around 40 stacks. I don't even think I'm 10% of the way through. I'm going to need so many melons to get this place finished, and then I'm going to need more for the cactus farm, which will be at least several dozen stacks. It's going to take forever. Genuinely, I wouldn't be surprised if this cactus farm takes up the entire video to complete. Although, thinking about everything that's going to go into it, maybe even more than these 100 days, which I know fills you with warmth and excitement seeing the same thing every day for 93 more days. Back at the base, all of the sand I'd collected at the desert went into the auto smelter. There's going to come a time in this series when I'm going to start using stacks and stacks of glass, so building up a good reserve of the stuff now is going to be helpful later. Also, you probably guessed, the lava is for the auto smelters. I'd ran out of fuel. Outside my house, I shot a creeper in the face. I imagine it hurt. While the smelters worked their magic on the sand, I worked my magic on my shovel at the mob spawner. The gold and iron armour that had been building up inside the spawner chests went into the furnaces. While I was throwing regular bows off the edge of the spawner platform, I accidentally threw my enchanted bow too and had to dive off the edge after it. Kind of felt like Fast and Furious without a dodge charger. Currently, I have enough melons to fill my storage shulker box and the spare space in my ender chest, but after having placed those 40 stacks of melons earlier, I know it's nowhere near enough melons. 8 days on from the last thunderstorm and it's thundering again already. Day 210, I finished farming all of my melons at the farm, and then as per usual went up to the mob spawner to repair my axes. Axes repaired, I flew back to the desert on day 211 to continue Project Cactus. Again, I'm doing the same thing as last time, flattening the terrain as much as possible until we reach the precipice of my shovel's breaking point, then stop and start placing melons. Once I'm out of melons, head back to the base to restock on melons and repair the tools. Electrifying. The shovel's breaking point was reached on day 212. Obviously, I stopped just shy of it. It wasn't just the shovel being put to use, my pick was getting in on the action too. Some of the sand mounds were high enough that there were a lot of sandstone hiding in amongst the sand, and that needed a pick. With my tools worn down, the final part of the day was spent placing melons. At some point, I need to get my hands on netherite. I wonder in the future if Mojang will be making something further on than netherite, like mithril or something. I mean, obviously they couldn't do mithril because that's Lord of the Rings, but I don't know, maybe it'll be too soon for them to do an upgrade from netherite, but it'd be interesting, maybe in like Minecraft 1.30 or something. I forgot to record day 213, but it was spent doing what I'm doing now, placing melons. This will be a good time to mention that a few of you watching have suggested I get the replay mod for recording purposes. I do like the idea of the replay mod, but I'm also not the best at installing mobs, so if I can muster the motivation to get round to figuring out how to do it, I will, and then maybe include it in future videos. We'll see. I know what I'm like, and I don't want to start relying on time lapses too much. Anyway, my melon stock ran dry, and here's another progress report. I'm working from the outer edges of the perimeter and spiralling inwards until I get to the centre. Not for any particular reason other than I think it will be satisfying. Picked up cacti, I'm going to be taking them back to the base with me and put them into the smelter for green dye. I collected more sand than I thought. I had to shove it into my different shulker boxes so I could carry it back on the flight. I'm going to be putting this lot in for smelting too. Get a load of glass. Might as well. Day 215, the cactus went into smelt. Mason Melon had ditched his grass block in favour of a melon block, a creature after my own heart. As well as the cacti, I unloaded as much sand as possible into the smelting system, and that was when I noticed a good number of the lava buckets had already been used up in smelting the last lot of items. It meant a quick trip to the nether to refill the empty ones, and it really was a quick visit thanks to my lavish melon road. My routine visit to the base wouldn't be complete without a trip to the mob spawner. It had become a staple part of my diet, and I looked forward to it. Yesterday I repaired the shovel, today on 216 I repaired the pick, then restocked on more of the melons I'd collected last harvest, before flying back to the desert. I changed things up this time. Rather than continuing to flatten the terrain, I shovelled out the squares I'd devoted to the cactus farm, before I fill the entire area with melons and forget the dimensions I'd laid out for the rest of the farm. If I do them now, they'll be noticeable because the melons will need to sit one block lower than the rest of the melons of the area. Do it now, save hassle later. Sounds like a slogan or something. Although I did have the hassle of pillagers bothering me, jealous that my project was making their pathetic pillager tower look feeble. So blinded by jealousy in fact that they shot their own captain in the back. Good. 217, I continued to place melons, until I got interrupted by a second group of pillagers. I killed every one of them but two, the captain and a normal pillager, with the hope of the pillager killing the captain like the day prior. It was going well until me and the captain fell into a hole, followed by the other pillager. Then I had to get both pillagers back out of the hole, but in the end got suffocated by sand and had to dig my way out, in the process accidentally killing the captain with my OP shovel, earning the bad omen effect. Exactly what I was trying to avoid. Bad omen effect or not, it didn't stop me from completing the layout for the rest of the cactus farm. This really is going to be huge once it's finished. Not that we're going to see it for some time, there's a lot of work separating now and then, but we are getting closer. All the terrain within the perimeter had been flattened. The only thing left to do before I could start rework building the cactus farm was to get all the melons placed. And that's all day 218 consisted of, that and these fuckers. Until day 219 rolled around and I'd used up all my melons. It's not quick progress, but it's coming along, just need to keep pushing. And then of course it was back to the base. I feel like all these days are beginning to blend together, they feel all the same. Though one difference was that I needed to grab milk from a cow to get rid of the bad omen effect. Then it was back into the base to work on the usual, put the sand into smelt, refill the empty lava buckets for smelting, empty out the auto melon farm, and harvest the wheat, which actually is a bit different than usual. I never harvest the wheat, and I don't know why I did, because after replanting I put all of it into bone meal, when I'm currently making a huge farm specifically for that. Day 220, my farming eyes scoured the melon farm to see if enough of them had grown to be worth my time harvesting. It was worth my time. Day 221, the farm is big enough that I can't harvest all the melons in a single day. Completely different than what it was like back in the beginning days of this series, and I still only consider this to be the start of my melon empire. I imagine in 1,000 or 2,000 days this is gonna look tiny. I'd gone up to the mob spawner for the previous days after finishing my time on the melon farm, and I continued to stay there after my axes were repaired to combine some of the enchanted bows that had accumulated in the chests. I'd combined one of the bows enough times that I'd gotten a top tier bow. It was better than the one I was currently using. It had all the same enchants, except it also had punch 2 and power 5 versus the power 3 on mine. Gonna have it as a backup. I also stayed to combine the enchanted book I'd made earlier in the series with a fresh bow as a further backup bow, seeing as I run infinity rather than mend it. That's 2 top tier bows waiting in the wings. The chests were getting full of rotten flesh, so packed my inventory with as much of the stuff as possible to trade to the clerics. It was an easy 32 emeralds right there. I went back to the spawner and converted a load of the bones into bone meal and then into bone blocks to conserve space. At home, we had another guest, a cat sat in the boat next to Mason Melon. I named Mr. Kitty After Dark. Day 223, I'm fed up with having an incomplete ender chest. My ender storage system has about half the number of shulkers I would like, and I wanted additional spare shulkers for additional inventory storage. It would mean I'd be able to carry more melons on me at a time, which is a melon farmer's dream, and of course it would suit the cactus farm project, seeing as I keep needing to transfer materials to and from the desert. Finding an end city didn't take as long as my first visit to the outer islands. With an elytra, it's an easy feat. Talking of which, this one came with a small boat, so we'll be getting ourselves a second elytra. There's also a second larger city nearby. It doesn't have a boat, but it will have a lot of shulkers. I always say to start small, and so the tiny city was the first target, and I ended up dying in a room full of shulkers. How impressive. And of course, my respawn point had to be the furthest possible place away from my base, the cactus farm. The cactus farm didn't have a nether road connecting it to the other portals yet, so I had 4,000 blocks of overworld travel ahead of me. 100% at some point, I'm installing ice roads. Day 224, it was a welcome sight to see my base. I restocked on the basic essentials for getting my gear back. Melons, food, a bow, ender pearls, armour, and then it was straight back into the nether, taking the road back to the stronghold. Before I went into the end, I'd meant to reset my spawn point, but I forgot, so I really hope I don't die again. The biggest problem was that I'd found the end city by flying, meaning I'd left no footprint of where my previous self had been. Luckily, I was 90% sure I remembered the direction I'd flown in. Yesterday with an elytra, this place didn't seem dangerous at all. Now, bridging across the void with my pinky finger glued to the shift key, I'm not feeling so good. But by the end of the day, I saw a beautiful sight. The end city. I'd found it. However, it was a ticking time bomb until my items despawned. First thing, turn the render distance down, so the countdown for the items to despawn didn't start until I got within render distance, which would be a lot closer than I am at the moment. And so the next day I went in like an elite SWAT team leader, going from room to room quickly with my mind on the single point of focus of my mission, reclaim my items before they were lost forever. When I died, I thought that was it, but a couple of days later, against all odds, here I was, with all of my items back. My diamond tools, my enchanted armour, my top tier sword, and elytra. It was a good day. Then I could get on with what I'd come here to do, raid end cities and kill those cube levitating motherfuckers. Surprisingly, I didn't have an ender pearl to get through the end gate back to the main island, so I built a melon roof and triggered a couple of endermen. Probably should have built it out of something other than melons, seeing as endermen can pick up melons. If I'd angered more than 2, I would have been in some trouble. Oh well, I made it back to the main island and then went through the portal home, so no biggie. Or not home, seeing as I hadn't changed my respawn location from the cactus farm. And that worked out well, because I had a ton of melons on me, so before I head back to base, might as well put them towards finishing the giant melon perimeter. It took until day 231 to finish getting them placed, then it was back to base, which, let me say, was a much more enjoyable journey with my elytra. Made a load of new shulker boxes, and named the ones that were going to be going into my ender chest to complete the personal storage system. I can now have a full roster of items neatly organised on my personnel at all times. I forgot to record the first half of day 232. I'd been collecting flowers for dyes. It's good having my ender chest shulkers name tagged, but as they're all the same colour, it can be kind of difficult to discern what's in what at a glance without hovering my mouse cursor over the top to bring their name tagged titles up. And colour coding fixes that. It is a great visual organisation method, and is a little quality of life hack that's going to make dipping in and out of my ender chest much more convenient. I colour coded everything with the exception of my wood shulker because I don't have any brown dye, and you can only get brown dye from cocoa beans, which can only be found in a jungle biome. If I remember rightly, I saw a jungle around 5,000 blocks out from the base on my last expedition when flower hunting. You know, the part of the day I forgot to record. Turns out I remembered wrongly. They were just regular oak trees that I somehow mistook for jungle. Fortunately, there was a jungle biome not too far away from the mistaken jungle biome, and in my hunt for the cocoa beans, it felt like every mob in the game came out to assault me, but they couldn't stop the inevitable. Cocoa beans were mine. Equipped with the new items, the day of 234 I was able to dye my wood shulker brown, and now I had a fully colour-coded shulker system inside of my ender chest. I doubt even Thanos could contain the energy residing within. Unlike me, who has been around melons my whole life, whose stamina and very being has been pushed to the limits every single day, I went through my shulkers one at a time and filled them with as much stuff as I could from my storage system back at home. The next day I was back to farming melons. At this point in time I already had a couple of shulkers and a double chest full of melons, but thanks to my recent trip to the end, I have a few more spare shulkers kicking around I can fill to the brim. The more I stock up, the less trips I have to make back here in the future. I've been avoiding sleep like the plague. I don't see the point in it when I can function perfectly fine without. However, phantoms are showing up so incredibly regularly, and just like they have done every other encounter I've had with them during this series, they really piss me off. So it was time to sleep. But it turns out because of Mason Melon, I wasn't allowed to sleep in my own house. So I went to the trade cave, though future me knows I could have just moved my bed a few blocks and I would have been fine. Day 236. Refreshed, I was back on the grind. As I was saying yesterday, now that I have additional spare shulkers, I can carry all of the melons I own with me to the desert, after I repair my axes. Melon farming takes a toll on even the most elite of tools. Plus, my elytra was in bad shape from all the flying I'd been doing recently. It took until the next day to finish repairing them. Again, I traded more rotten flesh that had built up for the extra emeralds, and then it was back to the cactus farm. To say I'm carrying thousands of blocks on me at the moment, I can't say I feel any more weighed down than usual. I've brought 12 shulkers full of melons, raring to be placed. It's a lot of melons, but I've got a lot of space to fill, so despite there being so much, I'm still uncertain if I'll have enough to finish the area without having to take another trip back to the base to restock again. For the next few days, all I did was place melons. It wasn't an exciting process, and more than once I was wondering how long the entire project was going to take. We're past a third of the way through the video, coming up to the halfway mark. I still haven't made a start continuing the actual farm build itself. Fortunately, the 12 shulkers of melons were enough to finish the entire area. All of the melons were now placed. It was a colossal effort, and I even have a shulker and 3/4 left. I can't help but feel I need to increase the size of the plaza back at the base. I'm sure this is going to be about double the size of that. Now it was finally time to restart the cactus farm. Resources were going to be an issue, so I got a shulker for sand blocks, a shulker for fence blocks, and a shulker for water buckets. I might have had a shulker and 3/4 of melons left over ready to be put to use, but there was no way it was going to be enough, seeing as I was building the actual farm out of melons. So while I waited for the melons back at the base to grow, I spent the night at the mob spawner. Day 245, I'm still waiting for my melons to grow, until my patience ran its course. In the end, I couldn't wait any longer and put my axe to use. The next couple of days were me gathering melons and then repairing my tools. Nothing much else to say really. But after my time at the base was done, it was back to the desert, and time to work on the farm. I only built the bottom layer for the other towers I'm going to be putting next to our original. I want to get the hopper collection system put in place now rather than waiting for the end to do it, when water and blocks are already placed, and of course, so they can be collecting cacti as I build the farm up. That meant digging out a space underneath the farm where all of the chests were going to be placed for each of the cacti towers. Having a large open space will make it easier for me to go from chest to chest collecting the contents. Although, now that I think about it, having one large collection system for the entire farm might be better. Probably will be better. Oh well, I can change that at a later date once the thing is built. I'm not going to replace the floor and walls with melons just yet, in case I need to renovate this room in the future if I do decide to change up the farm collection system. Once I know what I'm going to do, then I'll put in the melons. The last part of the day was spent working on building up the farm. Days 250 to 251 I devoted entirely to building up the second tower. By day 252 it was finished. Moving forward, I'm changing tactics. Rather than build up the towers one at a time, I'm going to work on the first layer of the remaining 10 towers and build them up a layer at a time. Switching between lots of different blocks and items is kind of fiddly / cumbersome. I'd rather focus on one block for all of the layers, then the next block for all of the layers, etc. It took all day to do this, and there are 19 layers in total, so if everything goes smoothly I'll have the farm built in another 18 days. Though that means having all the resources on standby to finish the farm and build the layers up with melons, so I'm probably looking at another 15 days work on top of those 18 days, so we're looking at around a day 205 finish point. I'm interested to see how accurate my estimate is. Day 253, though I'd carved out a space underneath the farms for collecting the cacti, I hadn't actually put in the hoppers and chests yet, so that's what I did today. Out of everything, by far the melons are going to take the longest to place because I need so many of them, so I figured if I solely focused on the melons, building up the entire framework of the farm, so I can come in later and put the sand, fences, cacti and water, it would speed it up. Also, seeing as the farm is very resource heavy on melons, I'm going to need way more of them than any other resource, and if all of my time is focusing on melons until they're all in place, it will mean I can take the appropriate number of trips back to the base to restock, because I can already tell you now I don't have enough melons on me to build the entire framework of the farm in this single sitting, but the other resources that I'm going to be using to build up the farm I will be able to just take over in one lump sum, and that should be enough, fingers crossed, to build up the farm. Here's where I'm up to at the moment. The basic framework of the first few layers are in, and I've got about 60 to 70% more of the way to go. The scale of the farm is beginning to become apparent, but I don't think it will really become apparent until the entire structure is built. It's probably overkill for what I need, but that's what will be good about it. Who knows, maybe further down the road I'll add even more layers on top and increase its size even more. The rest of the day was spent continuing getting the framework built, and for the next 2 days I built up the framework of each layer with melons. By the time night was coming in, the framework was finished. The real scale of the farm is now a lot easier to see. It's huge, definitely the biggest farm I've ever made to date. I have plans to make much larger farms in this series, including a huge auto melon farm. Once this is complete, it will provide all the bone meal and green dye I need for eternity. I've been thinking things over, and once the farm is done, having one large collection system for the entire farm rather than the separate ones I currently have in place for each tower is going to be the way to go. Now I've got to fill in that framework with more melons, and it's going to take longer and more melons than building the framework itself did. Here's the second layer filled, then I got to work on the third layer. Even inside my farm, phantoms are still trying to get to me, but they're stupid so they get stuck. Home advantage. Juice. It had taken most of the day to get this third layer done, but it's one more down. The next 2 days were spent filling in the framework of the farm with melons, until day 261 when I ran out again. I told you I didn't have enough melons, so back home I went. Before I got on with farming melons, I restocked on sugarcane. These flights are eating through my rockets, and having the paper and gunpowder at the ready to craft several more stacks at a moment's notice has become a necessity. Then I could get on with what I needed to do, melons, which obviously spilled over into the next couple of days. Day 264, I'm planning to hang around the base until the melons grow again, so I can get a second harvest and take double the melons with me back to the desert, because I already know with what I've got, I'm going to be back here in a couple of days. I still had some durability on my second axe to use up, so I'm putting it to use tree harvesting. It's always good to have wood reserves. For the second half of the day, I went up to the mob spawner to repair just the one axe. I plan to do more tree harvesting tomorrow during the daylight, and I have enough durability on my second axe after today's tree harvest to put in another session. Then I'll repair it during the night of tomorrow and have 2 fresh axes ready to harvest another lot of melons on day 266. So, bright and early the next morning, I went to the local forest and began felling those leafy bastards. Then, as planned, spent the night repairing the second axe back to full durability. And when day 266 rolled around, my plan changed. Not all the melons had grown. Another day or two being left alone and they should be ready. To keep myself occupied, other than chopping wood, was to begin work on a third layer of the melon farm. I'm not going to commit to finishing it these 100 days, because I know it won't happen. My main focus at the moment is finishing the cactus farm, but seeing as I'm here in the base already, might as well make some progress on farm expansion when, let's to be honest, it's going to happen at some point. The melons weren't quite ready for harvesting on day 267, so I continued working on the third layer of the farm, just putting in dirt, nothing special, but it takes so long. I think if I was to do bits here and there, it's going to be much more manageable. Days 268 to 269, the plan was back on track. They were spent melon farming. Enough of them had finally grown that I was happy with farming them. Even with the amount of melons I get from a single harvest, it's never enough, and I don't think it ever will be enough. Back at the cactus farm, I put those melons to use, building it up, filling in each layer one at a time. It took days 270 to days 276 to get them in place. It was at this point I started to doubt whether or not this farm would be done by day 300, let alone at my predicted day 285. I don't know, it's going to be close. Now all the melons were in place, I went with the sand next, and only the sand. I'm focused on putting in all the sand in place, then I'll work only on the fences, then the cacti, and finally the water, if I get that far. I spent all of day 277 placing sand blocks. I go through 16 blocks per tower layer, so a couple of stacks across the farm per layer. It adds up when you've got a lot of layers to put in. But I was still surprised when I ran out. I thought I had more sand on me than this. I flew back to the base to restock, but looking back now, it would have just been quicker to grab some from the surrounding desert. I've got an efficiency 5 shovel, it wouldn't have taken that long. Whatever I could have done better, it doesn't matter, because I ended up flying back to the base, picking up some sand that was in the auto smelters that thankfully had run out of fuel, otherwise I wouldn't have had any at all and would have had to fly back to the desert to collect some, wasting time on the flight. The sand that I did manage to get from the base should be enough to get all of the sand placed. If it's not, then I'll go collecting from the nearby terrain. By the next day, all of the sand had been placed in the farm, a lot quicker than the melons had been. From a distance, they kind of look like little eggs when I'm flying around the farm. It could pass for a giant egg factory. Next, fences. They're not going to be as quick as the sand, as I've got to put in place temporary blocks for me to attach the fences to, and then remove said temporary blocks once the fences are in place. Although I come to find out that the ceiling for each layer, which is the floor of the layer above, is actually low enough that I can attach the fences onto them to put them into place. That proves to be the quicker method when I figure it out, but even then it's still fairly slow going. I was doing nothing but fence placing for the next 4 days straight, and I was still placing them on day 285, my earlier prediction day for when the farm would be operational. It's close, and I'm back to being confident it will be finished before day 300, but it won't be done by the end of today. So I took a brief break to remove the cactus from the chests that had built up. They were completely full when it meant I wouldn't be able to collect any more until they were emptied. Then it was back to placing fences, which carried on into day 286, but I was convinced I'd get the last of them placed by the end of the day. When I got to the top layer of the farm, phantoms did their best to try and fuck things up for me, but it did not work. This isn't day 1 of the world. They can't overwhelm me now. And that was that. All the fences for the farm are now in place. And that led me on to the cactus placing part of the farm. It was pretty simple. Plant a cactus block on each of the sand blocks. With no water in place at the moment, I won't be able to collect any of them, but it's not long away now. I have at least got 2 towers fully operational before I switched to building tactics, so I have the access to enough cacti for the amount of sand blocks I have. The cactus placing got finished day 289, and then rather than go straight into water placing, first I wanted to get the entire farm lit up. I've already lit most of it up and I thought it was enough to prevent mob spawns, but turns out it wasn't. I haven't shown it on camera, but there's been a few mobs I've had to deal with, and endermen are a massive pain because they keep picking up and moving my melons, and it's really annoying because I keep finding holes in my farm as I'm building. Day 290, the final part of the farm building was underway, placing water for the cactus cacti to transport broken cacti into the hoppers and chests waiting for them at the bottom of the farm. I say the final part of the farm, that's not technically true because I'm going to add decoration to the farm and improve the collection system in the future, but it is the final part of the build until the farm is fully operational, and that's what I really care about. And it was expensive on rockets. I had to keep flying down from the farm to the ocean to refill my buckets and then fly back up to each layer. I must have been spending, I don't know, 3 or 5 rockets per layer on average. That adds up. I mean, obviously a high-flying melon tycoon such as myself can afford the cost, but it still weighed on my mind. Only 7 days after the predicted finish date, day 293, I got all of the water placed, and that meant the farm was officially quote-unquote finished. So much work had gone on between when I first started and now, and maybe it's overkill, but I'm never going to want for cactus again. The only issue now is that this auto cactus farm is far more impressive than my auto melon farm, and this is supposed to be a farm in melon series, so I'm going to have to make improvements in the auto melon department. In any case, I'm happy with the result, with what we've accomplished. I'm not so happy with the bloody endermen of the area. They keep teleporting into this melon sanctum and defiling it with non-melon blocks, with little to no respect for the hallowedness of this place. I know how it's happening. They're spawning outside the perimeter of the melons where I haven't lit up, and then making their way onto my melons thinking I don't know what they're playing at. Well, I've been around the block, Minecraft pun intended, a few times, and I know how to deal with these sorts of individuals. These sorts, however, there's no cure for, although I did have the weird encounter of one flying off into the distance to never return. Never seen that before. The next day, confident I wouldn't be getting any return visits from the Slenderman, I removed the unwanted blocks and then got ready to head home. Any items I'd collected in the chests while in the area, I shoved into shulkers that I'd been using for bringing resources to the farm, and then flew off. I'll return here when I need cactus. Back at home, I dumped the blocks and items into my storage system, and transferred a load of my cobblestone into a few shulker boxes to free up space in the stone and similar chests. I'm thinking maybe I need to go to the end again and pick up some more shulkers. Day 295, I did something completely different than anything I'd done up to date. There's some ice spikes not too far from the base, and I want to get some ice roads put in place here in the overworld, connecting the various areas of the world together. It'll save fuel on rockets for long travels, without sacrificing the speed of flying, seeing as ice roads are seriously rapid. I might put ice roads in the nether too, or instead create rocket fly tunnels. I don't know, at the moment the focus is on the overworld. I stopped when it turned dark. Mobs are a pain to deal with, and my elytra durability is low from all the long haul flights, so it was in need of repair. The next day I was back collecting ice under the protection of the sun. I'm only doing it while it's daylight. Like I said yesterday, mobs are a hassle to deal with when you're trying to get on with stuff. So, when night did come about, I went back to the base and towered up to y=300. This is how high the ice road is going to be. Up, out of the way, I won't have to dig through the terrain or reroute around things. I can build as the crow flies. It's going to be an exclusive road called the Sky Highway. I say exclusive like it's a server, who am I kidding? I'm the only person in this world, which actually means it is kind of exclusive. Currently I'm flying back to the cactus farm to check the coordinates so I'd be able to build a straight route to the farm from the base. The morning of day 297 I made it back to the base and flew past it. I'm heading straight for the ice. Until I remembered my inventory was full of melons, so I had to go back to my house to pick up some shulkers, and then it was straight to the ice. Nice. When night came around, I thought it was time to start on the road. With my ice to hand, I began the long process of bridging from the base to the cactus farm, over 4,000 blocks away. This may take a while. The next day I spent all day bridging. It was a slow process, seeing the world pass by one painfully slow block at a time. Phantoms obviously had to show up to slow my progress. They're obsessed with me. On their last appearance, I took care of them, only to get knocked off the edge by a zombie. By the time the day was coming to an end, I'd travelled roughly 1,600 blocks. That's about 1,000 more blocks than I thought I'd get. 1.5 more days and I'll be at the cactus farm. Then I'll just need to widen it, put up some rails, and we'll have a road from the base to the desert. I kept going until I ran out of ice, then confidently crafted a boat with the intention of using the ice road home. I stayed on it for about a couple of seconds before falling off the side. Back in my house, I had more ice tucked in amongst my storage chests, so I was able to get back to ice bridging that same day. Day 300, and what a nice sight seeing the cactus farm slowly come into view as I got nearer and nearer. And eventually I was there. I had an unbroken road of ice to the cactus farm. Completely unfinished, but we're getting there. I tried boating back again, but as you can see, it still didn't work. With all the excitement I've had over these last 100 days, I continued to the very end, putting in time at the mob spawner, repairing my pickaxe. I'm going to go ice collecting at the start of the next 100 days. Alright, bye!